Everest never told Jake of what she saw the night prior, either because she had convinced herself it was a hallucination in the snow, or because it all felt too much like a dream. The blizzard noticeably died down the next morning, briefly entering a state of calm before the mountain would soon be assaulted again. Morning! The husky climbed down the stairs to greet her owner. Jake was already dressed up in his ski gear, sitting on one of the lounge tables with his pup pad. He had hardly even noticed her. His absorption turned into writing documents on the tablet, keeping him focused. Frowning, Everest walked over and nudged his leg with her paw. "Jake? Huh?" He looked down in surprise, then relaxed when he saw his dog. "Oh, sorry. Morning, Everest. Don't you think it's too early to be working today?" "Sorry, the night was just hard," he sighed, setting the tablet down on the table. Everest's eyes followed the device he placed on it. A rush of guilt swallowing her throat, he continued. "Don't try calling anyone Barkenberg. The tower is shot. Anything we can do?" "I'll have to fix the radiator and reboot the whole thing," Jake grumbled, bending down to put his boots on. "I gotta do this now, while the blizzard is still light. It'll already start coming down again in a few hours." Tying his shoes and sharply standing up, Everest had backed up of his way. "Sorry you'll have to make your own breakfast," he said apologetically. "I'll be back inside later and we can play board games or something." The husky nodded in understanding, although she couldn't hide her disappointment as her owner walked away. Disappearing around the corner, in search of his tools, shuffling her paws idly, Everest's eyes wandered to Jake's pup pad, still sitting on the table. It sounded like a wound, a constant reminder of leaked private information she had spilled to Chase. She couldn't understand how simple names and numbers would have been such a severity, but the rules were rules. Her curiosity forced her paw. Everest looked around for a split second to make sure Jake wasn't around. Jumping on the table, the husky approached the device once more. She remembered that Chase had said, a memory that made her heart bleed. A group of fierce-sounding dogs that hurt her friends, and a crippling sense of injustice burned her inside. Her fur gently began to spike as her expression went stern. She had to know more. Anything that could help, all she wanted to do was help. If she could save even one more person from getting hurt, the world probably wouldn't end if she floated Chase more information. First, she daintily placed her paw on the pup pad, then flicked her eyes to it, and then slid just an inch closer until completely pulling it into her grasp. Accessing its files, she worked diligently as she swiped through its contents until she found what she was looking for. Jake didn't keep too much information on his pup pad, as more compelling evidence as housed on the actual computers, but she refused to give up. The tablet had to have something. What Jake did keep on his pup pad were several direct access to links to every tower on the mountain, allowing him to monitor their conditions and run diagnostics should a scenario demanded by searching alphabetically. She uncovered a page with the tower data with a gripping name, Telecom 4306, signed as ACG. The name of the organization Chase still mentioned held a faint flicker in her mind. She opened it without thinking, and the device buzzed to life as the tower's outline was painted on the screen, complete with several footnotes and numbers she didn't understand. "What are you doing?" Jake's voice sounded behind her. The husky spun around in surprise, jolting slightly as her body flattened. "Oh, Jake, she stuttered. Why are you going through my tablet?" Everest panicked. "Well, you said you were looking at the damage on the towers." She put her words together hastily. "So I thought maybe I could help you look for them?" The dog laughed nervously, spreading the most genuine smile she could possibly create. "And I thought I saw some on that one." Jake looked her up and down, confusion twisting his face as he crossed his arms. "Thanks, but I can handle it myself." He reached down and pulled up his pup pad out of Everest's arms, taking it back from her. Looking down at the file she had pulled up, Everest felt a twinge of fear when she realized what he was reading. "You saw the damage?" he said, his voice almost interrogative as his eyes studied the tablet. How? This would only show problems in the communication line. It wouldn't display actual physical damage on the tower. Everest was running out of lies, her vision flicking to the sides as she flagged a response to kick in. Oh, really? 'Cause I. Wait a minute. Jake narrowed his eyes, suddenly shifting his entire focus into the tablet. For a brief moment, he forgot Everest was even there, turning slightly and staring at his pup pad as he read something that caught his eye. The husky held her breath, still keeping still on the table as she watched the tower owner's bewilderment. What is this? It, she was afraid to ask. Jake sharply held up his finger at her, gesturing her to meaning to wait. Still, he didn't take his eyes off the screen. He mumbled something the dog couldn't hear before suddenly turning and starting to walk off. His eyes burned into the printed data display on the screen alongside the tower, glued onto one single number. That's unusual. Nervously walking after him, Everest barked his name. Jake, what's wrong? Her owner paused for a moment, then looked at her with a befuddled expression. It's just technology stuff. I don't think you'd understand. I could try. It wouldn't be easy explaining certain terms to a dog. Jake tapping his fingers on the tablet as he raced to find his answer. This tower is the one you pulled up. Its bandwidth, he stuttered, trying to find the words. It's exponentially higher than literally any other tower on this mountain, he said, unable to believe what was coming out of his mouth. What does that mean? It means... The skier hesitated, trying to find the words to word it. Bandwidth is like a frequency of how much something is giving information. It means how much the network is working, if that makes sense. He looked back to the tablet eyeing the screen. This tower you pulled up, it's a bandwidth nearly double size of the other towers. Maybe it's a big tower? No, he stood up, waving off the dog. This is just an average steel frame telecom tower. The one we built for Adventure Bay was 3 times its size, he explained, and yet that tower barely uses a third of what was this one using. His arms slowly went limp as they fell into his sides. I've never seen anything like this before. As her owner set the tablet down, his distress was visible, tapping her paw on the table. Everest asked the first question on her mind. What would have increased the bandwidth? Frequency, Jake said after a moment, sighing in frustration. You need something to do. The stronger the network it'll need. Turning her eyes to where he had set down the pup pad, her head tilted as she tried to understand. And this one tower uses more than the giant one connected to the whole city? What if it's doing more than we know? It was a valid question, the one that made Jake turn back at her with an intrigued look. That would be a breach of contract. Everything built here and all of its functions must be disclosed to me at the signing of the paper. His voice held a sharp growl. Damn it, if someone is doing something under my radar, then I'll have to investigate. But I can't with this blizzard. There's just not enough time. What if I did it? Everest quickly said, sitting proudly and wagging her tail. You'll deal with the Barkingberg Tower, and I'll go find out what's going on with the other one. Absolutely not, Jake said immediately, pointing at her sharply. This is what could be dangerous, and you don't know what's out there. I don't want to risk dropping you out in the snow, especially with the blizzard mere hours from coming back. What if I just looked? I said no. No, Jake, listen. The husky fluffed out her fur, trying to appear as confident as possible. I could do it. Just tell me where to go and I'll go look. I never said that I get close. Let me at least do some recon. We don't even know what that is. That's why you have a husky, right? Everest said proudly. You need someone to go out in the snow and check. Jake was visibly losing his patience with the animal. Everest, I am not about to abandon you in the snow. You're not abandoning me. What if I take the signal flare? My pup pack and all of it, she argued, her desperation to be useful sharpening her voice. Look, I don't want to be cooped up in this cabin, okay? I want to go outside. You want to go outside? Fine. Her owner threw his hands up in defeat, but quickly pointed straight at her with narrow eyes. But you come straight back if you see anything out there. I am not losing another husky. The argument had not been a pretty one, but Jake finally gave in and started preparing his husky for her new mission. Everest found herself strapped in with so much equipment it felt like she was covered in duct tape. Her pup pack was attached to her harness, and Jake fastened a special holster onto the back leg, a signal flare. As much as she wanted to ask if it was really necessary, she didn't want to risk making him angrier. Waddling to the door, her body heavy with metal and tools, Jake stopped her before she could step out in the snow. Listen, head southeast from the resort until you pass the ACG tower, he explained, a noticeable unease in his voice. Keep going in that direction until you see whatever it is connecting to it. How do you know it's in that direction? The dog cocked her head. I had access to our server farm, painstakingly pick apart every single connection visible on the mountain, he grumbled. Eventually I found it and ran the IP address. Why didn't we have just do that to begin with? Everest, I have every little reason to go even near the server farm on any given day, he said, expression going across. I never even knew there was a foraging signal connection until you brought it up on my pup pad. They shifted under the weight of her equipment. You could always say it did add to the list of things to do every day. You mean spend 2 hours in a room that feels like an oven going through 100 miles lines of code? Please, he laughed. Tell me when you find someone willing to do that. Now get out there before I change my mind. Nodding quick and understanding, Everest pulled her snow goggles on and raced outside to the intense snow, the clouds above looming over the frozen wind. Everest had trekked in the snow hundreds of times, many of which under more extreme conditions, so there was a little worry in her mind as she hiked through the frozen slush. She was slightly uncomfortable with all the gear Jake had practically stapled onto her, but she had already overstepped enough just to get to this point. It was better to keep her muzzle closed for now. She walked what felt like hours, and the wind gradually starting to get colder and faster by the minute. Still she was fearless, passing by the ACG telecom tower without a thought in her mind. Traversing what felt like a white infinity for a while, a shadow suddenly came into view. Hurrying forward, Everest approached what she thought was a large igloo. To her was such a rare in the mountain, but they had turned up for better. But as she got closer, her eyes widening in astonishment. It was more than just an igloo. It was the entire structure of a metal and steel, a solid building positioned far out where no one could see it. The outpost was nearly consumed by snow, and the main building was almost recognizable, while the satellite towers stuck out like arms reaching out for help. Not even the flashing red lights atop the towers were functional. The entire building was a chilled shell buried away. Jake? Everest was about to yell over the frozen winds, pounding in her face. I found the source of the signal. What is it? A tower? Not just a tower, it's... She paused to shake some frost off of her. It's a whole outpost, like an entire base someone set up. You're kidding. I'm looking right at it. She shook her head of the frozen snow on her face, confusion brimming in her mind. This outpost is practically frozen dead. How is that intact signal coming from here? I don't remember any place like that. Find a beacon and read me its number. I may be able to run that. Anxiety blend from the radio. Jake's voice on edge. And for God's sake, once you find it, come back here. The blizzard is starting to come down. Squinting her eyes, the husky tried to see through the freezing fog that veiled her vision, hunting for the light up the marker that was the policy to step outside. They existed for a reason. The light meant to be seen through the blizzard and provided lost souls with the direction of the nearest shelter. Every single outpost and satellite tower was supposed to have one, yet Everest didn't see a thing. It's either broken or... The husky had tried to move against the wall of the outpost, hiding from the wind's direction. Buried in the snow. Jake tried to think of a solution. Try to find a piece of equipment. It may have a name or something on it, something I can search in our database. I can't see any vehicles out here. I may have to go inside. Her ears flattened at the thought. I'll try to find something. Jake sounded like he was a little more ready to argue, a hesitant breath coming for the line, yet he could see the severity of the situation. All right, do that. I'm going to be occupied for a while, her owner said apologetically. The blizzard has been harsher on the towers than I thought. It's going to take a long time to get them all in order. Turning her face against the wind, Everest trudged through what was supposed to be the door. The front entrance was buried in snow and ice, barring anyone from the entry unless they were good with a shovel. Do you need help? Yes, actually. His voice strained on the other end, likely from pulling himself up the tower. But I don't think you can help me. Stopping to breathe, a fumbling sound coming through the radio before he spoke again. I need mechanics, not snowboards. You think maybe Paw Patrol can help? Everest got to work forcing through the wind as she put her paws on the snow, starting to dig out the entrance. I think Rocky has a thing or two about machines, but I spoke to Chase the other night, she grunted. A freezing patch of frost soared through the wind and struck her, coating her fur in a soft white. Rocky isn't— Ah! Everest, are you okay? Fine. She shook herself off, knowing it was pointless even more snow to blow into her. Chase said Rocky was hurt, something about a military group. She trailed off, unable to remember the full details in her delirious. I don't remember. Rocky got hurt is all I know. But I do remember this weird group of bikers from a while back, she said through the cold, kicking out the snow behind her as she dug onto the ground. The Rough Pack, I think they were called. Bikers? These satellite towers are satellite towers, not motorcycles. If you really need mechanics, they may be our only option. Possible. Well, maybe I can. Jake trailed off suddenly, like he had spotted something. What the hell? What's wrong? Everest shouted over the wind. Don't tell me something else just went wrong. I'm not sure. The bandwidth from earlier just leveled out, completely cleared up. Whatever was connected to it, it just got shut off. The husky panned in her exertion, continuing her exacerbating. Shut off? Like someone went in and did it manually? The blizzard was getting loud enough that it could be clearly heard through the radio, Jake having to yell over himself. Maybe. I'm not too sure what's going on anymore. I have to contact Ryder. Maybe he can connect me to the Rough Pack. I'm sure they would appreciate some paid work for the next few days. Alright, I'll let you go. Find anything you can on that outpost. Whatever it takes. Jake out. The line went dead, her owner having to hung up the line, and Everest had already dug several feet in the snow. The door was exposed, a large plank of metal covered in ice. A single window fogged with frost. Rough salt, she barked, and a hatch on her pup pack opened up, a small dispenser rotating out. There was a lingering hum and a splash of pure salt solution that shot out of massive blasts, coating the door. I knew that it would come in handy one day, she laughed weakly. Aware of the small icicles forming under her lips, the small machine retracted. She jumped up and grabbed the door handle, trying to pull it open, but to no avail. She trudged with all of her might, even shifting her weight in bursts, but the entrance refused to open. But the biting cold already threatening to consume her, Everest whined as she fought against it. A blast of salt melted the ice and coated the lock, yet it still remained firmly stuck like concrete had been poured into the hinges. Her teeth finally scraping off the handle, her strength was wasted as she tumbled into the snow. Ugh! She groaned, her jaw was sore. Passing out in the snow was a death sentence. The blizzard would bury her in minutes. Her body was turning into blue stone, and she would never be found again. Wincing as she got up, breathing loudly as heavily as her nose went numb. She tried to get inside, out of the wind, and out of the assaulting frost. The outpost was well farther than any other tower or resort. In desperation, she began to cry out, looking back at the door as the blizzard roared into her ears. She spotted the window, nothing but a simple pane of glass. Without thinking, she tore at the straps of her pup pack. She numbed her paws and unresponsive as they snapped into clasps, her pack falling off her body harness into the snow. Everest had grabbed it in her teeth, holding by one of the straps, and flung it at the window with all of the might she had left. It was a perfect shot. The blunt edge of its rectangular shape pierced the brittle, the frosted glass shattering instantly, and the pup pack could be heard hand landing inside with a clang. Everest had seen plenty of spy movies, but never once she had considered herself an infiltrator. There was a little grace as she jumped into the broken piece of the window frame, scrambling her paws in desperation as she heaved herself. She tried to be careful to avoid the small pieces of jagged glass sticking out of the sides, keeping her emotions compact in the stable. Falling into the darkness, the husky landed roughly on her side, but the layer of snow that blanketed the floor had already cushioned her fall. Grunting through the pain, and her sore body screamed in protest as she pushed herself up. The freezing chill had followed her inside, but the wind was securely barred from entry. She was safe from the worst of the blizzard in here, and she needed to now was to find warmth. Dazed, she collected her pup pack and set it aside, as her spine was groaning from all the fall and likely wouldn't be able to support it for now. Looking back at the door with a frown, she searched for any kind of lock responsible for her resorting to pain injury. Her agitation quickly shifted in surprise, an unexpected sight becoming known to her. The door was never stuck. Someone had welded shut. "What the hell?" the husky said out loud. Her voice cracked in the exhaustion as she observed the melted metal that sealed the door. How did... Her aimless questions only trailed off, nothing around to answer them. All she had was the outpost, and if she wanted answers, she needed to go look for them herself. "Ugh, rough flashlight," she barked weakly, looking towards the unresponsive pup pack. Several seconds of silence went by, and the husky growled annoyance. "Oh, for the love of rough flashlight!" she snapped. Her voice pierced the chill air. The pup pack gave a weak squeeze before a flashlight slowly extending out of the front hatch, its mechanical arm limping in the cold, and the freezing temperatures were not being kind to her own equipment, forcing Everest to wrench off its grasp and use it manually, holding the light in her teeth. She walked through the outpost. Nothing electrical worked. The cold had fractured the water pipes and frozen any piece of hardware to uselessness. She traversed through the dark hallways of snow, nudging back stuck doors and leaving its paw prints in the ground. More questions sprung her head as she moved. Why hadn't the heating systems prevented this? Even if no one had been there for some time, most outposts on the mountains would have some sort of functional systems to keep the water pipes running and the electric safe. What had happened here? Passing her beam of light every inch of empty hallways, Everest searched for anything that she could take back to Jake. Eventually she found the door she could open, although by a meager amount. She had to press the entire forehead and put her back to the motion. Grunting as she forced it open by a few inches, it was enough for the husky to barely wedge through the small gap. The light squeeze that had left an ache in her shoulders. Shaking the pain out, Everett sneezed some dust out of her nose and shone her light around her. Like a gift from the heavens, her beam glided through the tablet sitting on the table. The screen was frosted over and it's worn out, but Everest was quick to run it over to collect it. Turning it over in her paws, she wiped off a layer of frost on the backside, exposing the indental symbol she didn't recognize. The only legible part, 5 simple words engraved underneath it. Property of... She squinted, reading the words out loud. The Archline Foundation? Her mind drew back a blank at the name, another question left unanswered. Hitting the home button on the tablet, the screen brightened to life, but Everest was quickly met with a spider web of jagged colors and lines. The screen was broken beyond function, its touch accessibility unresponsive as well. There were clearly some document open behind with the fractured mess, and if she squinted, the puppy was able to make out a few words. The top right corner of the screen was intact enough that she could read the piece of the heading. The only visible words she could see were the cut-off sentence that only showed a third of its text. There was nothing she could do with that, and a frustrated whine left her muzzle. However, there was a visible date. That's... Everest narrowed her eyes as she read it. That's like a week ago. Scanning the rest of the screen, the husky was able to pick out the words from the document. one that evaded the fractures of the screen. Subject, platform, release, guild adventure, unknown city, conceal, parasite mayor. Even with the obscurity, Everest was still a fleeable attempt to piece the words together in her head, a fruitless endeavor, and there was a sentence visible that caught Everest's eyes sentence with each word that she didn't understand. Endure secure transportation of Barox Miles, she read out loud, tilting her head, and the Mentorgara? Confusion ran in her head. She had never heard such names before. The screen was locked in the document. The accessibility was broken to allow her access into the machine. Jake would likely know what to do, so she attached the device to her harness, weaving the straps around the electronic to keep it firmly in place. The entire room had a strange aura of tragedy, a wave of unease passing through her with each step she took. She stopped moving suddenly. A flicker of paranoia climbed onto her as she shone the light all around the angles. She had heard something? Why had she felt afraid? She didn't know, and couldn't understand why. The beam of light gilded over upturned file cabinets and what looked like discarded pieces of body armor on the floor, each fragment lined with the torn threads and black fabric. A shiver ran down her bones. One alien in nature. A shiver not from the cold but fear. She couldn't stay here any longer. Her nerves refused to keep her in the area. She had already had the tablet, and there were likely other things from the outpost worth getting. But the mission slipped her mind. Enough was enough. She turned back to crack the door and leave. She stopped. Her body locked up in paralysis. Her eyes narrowed at what she saw. Her mind first believing it was a mere trick of light. Once it had clicked that she was seeing, her heart began to skip, her breath quickening as her body defied to move. Two eyes were staring into the room, looking from the darkness behind the door. They were peeking like a nosy child and staring straight at her. Everest took a single step back, her flight response to beginning to build up. The eyes within thin and pin-pricked, like beads of light visible in the consuming blackness behind the door. She couldn't see any other feature, just glossy marble-shaped eyes staring into her. Then it grinned. She knew it grinned because of the beam of light of the flashlight reflected off its teeth. Its jagged fangs emerged from the light, and the wide smile twisting off its muzzle and curling up its face. It carried an expression of either sadistic or joy, or of that twisted creature trying to mimic the smile. Everest's movement had been slow, but when it smiled, she began to shake. With emotion so static it seemed artificial, the face began moving out from the door, emerging through the crawl space into the living room. "Jake!" she screamed, grabbing her backward until her back slammed against the table. "Jake, this isn't funny! Stop!" The creature's front legs slowly extended from the darkness, gently placing its foot on the floor, then began to walk. It kept a full contact with her as it moved, not averting its gaze the entire time. "Get away!" the husky cried out, her instincts flaring in all directions as terror clouded in her mind. The flashlight dropped from her mouth and landed on the floor, the beam coming to a rest on the intruder. Crying in distress, Everest barked and snarled as much as she could. "Get away from me!" It moved further. Suddenly the flashlight clicked off. It broke without a moment's notice, shutting off so fast it seemed deliberate. Everest was bathed in frozen darkness, blind and trapped in the room, trapped with the intruder. The following events seemed like a blur. There were a few seconds of pitch silence, nothing more but terrified heaving able to be heard. Then a single sound broke in the darkness. A faint, low exhale, mere inches away from the cloud of hot breath hit her face. Exploding into the movement, Everest screamed for her life, panic surging through her as she began sprinting. Her body knocked off several objects as she ran, each one causing loud crashes to follow. Adrenaline coursing through her veins, she fled in the blind in the direction she could be, making it back to the entrance by her pure luck. Moving with such a velocity that her breathing couldn't keep up, the husky sprinted for the door, kicking up the clouds of snow and completely running past her discarded pup pad. Her voice cried and squeaked as she jumped back up the window, no longer controlled the movement to save her belly from glass. Her stomach ran red as flesh was torn from her fur, tearing from her body as the glass edges gilded her under her. A crimson glistening was left behind the glass, shining in the snow as its soul ever as blood. The husky fled from the outpost, sprinting back in the blizzard for a whole new world of danger. She didn't dare look behind her for even a moment, running outside as her heart quaked and pondered in her chest, leaving a small blood trail as she moved. A plague of dizziness followed behind. Gradually her running slowed, her vision frosting over as the freezing winds threatened to take her. With nothing but infinite white in all directions, Everest lost her strength and collapsed forward, landing in the snow as the ice began to cover her. When the pain began to fade, the frozen soothe easing in her in the snow, her body slouched with exhaustion and an urge to sleep gripping her eyes. With what little she had left, she reached a heavy arm to the back leg, grabbing the flare gun from its holster. Rolling onto her back, her body barely visible as ice formed around her, she held the gun in the air and fired it, a sharp recoil swatting the gun out of her paw, and a burning beacon of red light shot into the sky. It was hopeless utility, its final last-ditch attempt with what she had left. Unable to fight her exhaustion, Everest slowly passed out in the snow with the distant sound of the vehicle's motor begin emerging in her ears.
What's up, my pretties? It's the Lion Queen here. I want to appreciate you all for tuning into this video, and I do appreciate you guys supporting my video by giving this video likes and stuff. If you really enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, comment and subscribe if you're new, ring the bell for notifications to when I upload so that way you guys will get updated for whenever I upload. If you want to follow me on Twitter or DeviantArt, feel free to leave a follow on those if you are interested in following me on those socials. If you want to support my backup channel, known as Miss Dark Shigo, feel free to subscribe to it, as a link to that will also be in the About page section. And with that being said, and that being the case, thank you so much for watching, my pretties, and as always, please stay pretty.